Okay, the medium I use is this alkaloid. I don't know the name of this brand, but it's the cheapy brand. It's kind of an oil. It's a quick drying. I like to get my brushes good and saturated with that before I start, and that means painting will be dry tomorrow. Probably because of my illustration background, I tend to start up in the upper right corner. I chalk it up to that, being a pencil drawer all those years, and not wanting to get my drawing smudged. For landscapes, it's good to use any kind of ground to paint on. I always recommend to my students that they get some sort of ground, but you can use any color, gray or blue. The only color I don't recommend is like green or yellow. The reason I use red is because it counters all the greens in the landscape. So you can see here too, I pre-mixed some colors. One thing that's pretty important about how I paint is changing up the brush. You know, not just, painting everything like that. My teachers have taught me that every time you go to the palette, you should change your color up a little bit, and that's something I try and do. So you don't, well, he would always say is be a painter, don't be a house painter, right?
Yeah.
Which is brilliant advice, I think. Another good tip is foam book for cleaning your brushes. I'll use the paper towel for wiping off excess paint, at least while we still have phone books.
Is there something special about the phone book that is...
No, it's just cheap paper. It's nice, it's portable, and it actually works really well. And if it saves you, a 4-pack of paper towels costs,
Yes.
$3-4, and I could go through a roll of paper towels in a day.
Yeah.
So it saves a little money. So I do follow my reference somewhat, but I totally advise people not to follow the reference too faithfully. You've got to make paintings, not copies of photos. Paintings that are copies of photos are some of the world's most boring paintings, and nobody wants to look at that. You want the painting to be interesting.
So what parts of the
What
parts of the photo are you then drawing reference on?
Well, whatever catches my eye. I mean, I found that I can do quite a few landscapes just out of my imagination. But what I find the problem is with that is that because it's dealing with archetypes from just my imagination, things get very samey. Like there's always a pond on the ground, and there's always a tree on the left, and you know what I mean. So the photo kind of gives me inspiration, and that's the best use of it, just inspiration. Don't sit there and try and copy every branch or every leaf of just inspiration. You can see here my reference, how it's at an angle. I've learned the hard way that those sorts of things don't really work in paintings, so I've pretty much eliminated it. I made it straight. That's not, a hard, fast rule. I might change that if I had good reason. But I'm certainly... Also, one of my reasons for pre-mixing my colors is it just kind of keeps me on the straight and narrow. Here you can see I changed my brush direction. And with this smaller boards, I like to work with a textured board. That's too bright. Because it grabs the paint and makes some nice textures. The idea, though, is that you can see I'm using a brush most people would consider too large for a small painting, but that gives you more interesting painting. You don't need a lot of detail in your paintings, really. That's not gonna. Detail is very rarely gonna make a good painting. But the problem with it is that as the artist invested in all the time it took to do all that detail, you lose sight of the fact that your work's getting all tight and closed up and making people uncomfortable when they want to look at it. You know, that's the whole idea. The point is to look at it and feel, feel a nice feeling of freedom and relaxation, and that's what I shoot for in my work. I want a lot of interesting, pretty colors, and you can see too, the nice thing, one thing I hate is, and the reason I work with a colored background is when you work with white, you have to make an extra effort to cover all the white. And you can lose some of the gestural impetus of your strokes, right?
Mm.
Where here, if there's a little bit of that red peeking through, it's fine, looks fine, not a problem. Okay, I'm kind of losing my way a little bit.
So did you start with a reed background and then drew on top of the reed background? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I draw the background with a brush. I usually work with this, and I work with the same two brushes.
Yeah.
And I just draw with the brush using sepia and, sepia, I would say sepia, sorry, I mean burnt sienna. And phthalo green to get the dark. Right now I try not to overwork things. That's another lesson you learn as a painter eventually if you're going to be any good. You gotta let your paintings live. You gotta let them be paintings and let them be an expression of what you're doing. If you're not doing that, then you're illustrating, and I had a tendency to do that since I was an illustrator and made my living doing that for 15 years. But even good illustrations, you notice a lot of times too, I'll mix a color and then I'll go up and see how it is, and if it's too light or dark, I'll adjust from there. I don't like to have competing light spots in my skies. I'll tend to put one spot that is the brightest. Again, that's just experience. I'll do a little bit of blending, but there'll be quite a bit of that red peeking through, and that's one of the reasons I like to use a pretty color like that.
Mm.
If you're going to try to do a painting and you think every single stroke you do is going to be conscious, that's going to be one crappy painting. It's your intuition that's, it's got to be an interplay. It's like an idea comes to mind, it's like, how about a little red there, or how about a little green, or how about there? It needs to be an interplay. It needs like the marriage of the conscious and unconscious. That's one of the beautiful things about art, really, is that you can play like that, and sort of part of you is watching what you're doing, and part of you is doing it, and then there's another part commenting on it. So I'm going to be doing a larger version of this painting, which I'll be probably going in with my first layer the same way. But on the larger versions, I'll come in again and I'll do a few touches here and there, or I'll do glazes.
What's a glaze?
A glaze is like when you take some of this medium and you put a little bit of paint down there and you mix it in, and then usually I use a paper towel or something, and you rub it in. Like one of my favorite colors to glaze with would be black.
When it's dry,
What's that now?
when it's dry or weak.
Oh, dry. Yeah, you can't glaze when it's wet. Alkaloid is it's an oil-based. It's like a drying agent.
So oils dry quicker.
Yes, it does, much quicker. I like to make it dark. One thing is I never, for my darks, I do not tend to use, I do have black on my palette, but for my darks I mix alizarin crimson with phthalo green, and you get a dark,
Phthalo green acceptable.
That's a real intense green. It's actually a much stronger color than alizarin, which on its own is a color, but you can see as I modify it, gives me almost a purple, like I could push it towards green or red. But this gives you a dark with some life in it. The problem with going in with blacks and doing your darks with the blacks is that it's very cold and lifeless. I do tend to work dark behind, light on top. That's a good way to work with oil. You can work the opposite though if you want. That does work too. I want a certain amount of liquidity here so that I can. This is one of the reasons I like to have a drawing underneath, so that right now I can just sort of concentrate on color and expressiveness. I've already sort of figured out where I want things to be. I don't like to spend too much time. I don't like to spend too much time on any one aspect, because what happens when you spend too much time is things get very tight. So one of the things is like if it's good or bad, at least make it expressive, make it a true expression, okay? So now my intuition says, hey, time to change things up. So I'm going to add some of this, it's called transparent earth yellow. I'm adding this to my dark because I want to start getting some warmth in the background. I don't want it competing with the darks in my tree. That's one thing I've learned too. You've got a dark, one problem with photos is that they make all the darks look the same. Whereas when we're looking at things with our natural human vision, we can see a lot of details in the dark. We can see a lot more variance and variation in the shadow areas than cameras can capture. The burnt sienna is my favorite color, and that's the color that's in the background there. It's a very rich red. It's a nice earthy color, but it's vibrant. This is pine from like scooters, and then I buy some sealer, acrylic sealer, and I just put some of that acrylic burnt sienna right in there and mix it together. And I'll do 1 or 2 coats. Actually, with this stuff, I put for the texture, I put some transparent gesso in there, and I'll go with the side of the brush, and that's how I get this kind of pattern. And the thing I like about color is like you hear that voice in your intuition saying, hey, why don't you try a little red, try a little green. Okay, now one of my favorite greens is, it's yellow. I use cad yellow hue. One of the real great arguments for using oil paint is that you can use this lead white. Lead white, I mix my white that I use is half lead white and half titanium white. Lead white is a warmer white, where titanium is always very cool. And titanium white also is quite, makes your colors chalky. One of the things it does do is it's got a lot of opacity and coverage ability, which is great. Lead white is far more transparent, but it's also, if you look at any old paint, any painting done before 1930 was done with lead white, not titanium. That's a modern color. So you can see here, I like to use every part of my brush. That's the thing. I don't sit there and just, one of my students will tell you that I'm always on them for that.
Mincy.
Yeah. Well, just, licking. Lick, 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 lick. Don't paint like a robot. Don't paint like a machine. You want to paint like an artist. And
Monkey brain.
that's part of the, see, she's repeating my,
I wrote it on my wall.
You want to, what the beautiful thing about doing art is expressing everybody's different and everybody's going to do something different. And you can learn things from people. But I always get into a challenge here. I want to lighten my green, but I don't want to add any white. So sometimes I have to keep picking at it. In fact, lead white was almost, it's very hard to find in the States too, but there's a whole movement getting back to representational art in the States and getting back to, an appreciation of the effort that goes into making something look representational, look nice, and also an appreciation of the media that our predecessors used. And lead white, like I said, if it was painted before 1930, and you're trying to do that sort of look, and you're working with titanium white, you're going to have to work twice as hard. So the reason for the cad hue, Haley, is because cadmium is a modern pigment as well, and cadmium and lead can have a tendency to oxidize and turn black, which is not good, not what you want. So for that reason, I use the cad hue instead of the pure cadmium. Now, talking about landscape painting, one of the main challenges of landscape painting, especially here in New Zealand, where we don't really have a change of season, everything's green here, green, or silver, right? It's all green or silver. That's one of the reasons why I manipulate my reference extensively in Photoshop, so that I can push things out of that. Again, the camera will capture, seems to capture, as far as best as I can tell, like 3 or 4 different greens. and that's it. As an artist, one of your big challenges painting the landscape is all these greens, you know, and having differences, making things look different. You know, you don't want everything to have the same quality or feeling. And the solution to that is red. Red, red, red. Red is your friend. You mix red and green together, or mix this burnt sienna. And you see I'm painting right now almost straight up red into this tree. It doesn't look red at all. It still looks green, right? So my one of my biggest advice to anyone who's starting to learn painting, change up the brush. Change up the brush. Quit painting like a robot.
What do you mean by change up? Just
Use it, grab it like that,
Yeah.
grab it like that, grab it like that, put it in your mouth, you know, like that, you know. Just change it up,
Yeah.
you know, use all sides of the brush.
Yeah.
Get some expressive quality in there, you know, and as you do that, you'll find your intuition will be triggering you and say, hey,
Yeah.
why don't you try changing the direction of the brush? You go, oh wow, this is so much easier to get what I was after. You know, go in, do a dot, is that good? If it is, then proceed. If it isn't, go back to the palette. Don't try and make something work that isn't working. And that's a big tip too. Use the biggest brush. I was telling someone the other day, bigger brushes mean better paintings. There's my slogan. So I added black to my palette, and a lot of the teachers in the of painting these days, it's very popular to, especially I don't recommend any student learning with black paint. I don't. I think it's better to avoid black because it's a color killer, as is white. Titanium white is a color killer. Like your average amateur painter will think, oh, I want it darker, I'll add black, and then they wonder why their painting is so ugly. Yeah, so, but knowing that it does that, like if I want to kill some color, I don't want things too bright. I want, you know, a little bit of, I don't want, you know, you can see how bright these colors on my palette. I couldn't paint a landscape with any of these straight out of the tube. And the main reason for the black on the palette is to make that really pretty green, which is the best landscape green there is, if you ask me, which is cad yellow and black makes a wonderful green. And I might say, yeah, you can use your black for that, but really, don't use that black to darken it. Try and, instead of trying to darken a color you have, it's better to, it would be better to mix a color that looks like that darker color you want, right? One of my teachers taught me that you want to have a point of intense contrast in every painting, right? Because that catches the eye. And people are like birds. If a raven sees a shiny bit of foil, they can't resist it. People are not much different. They're going to look for contrast. That's what's going to attract them. If you've got too many contrasts everywhere in the work, there's nothing you don't have a strong focal point, there's no payoff for people. And one of my big things about paintings, I'm always, like I have all these colors in the sky, I want there to be a payoff. You can see rather than getting a little brush, you can use a corner of your brush and get a very nice result that way. One more. I think we'll call it a day right there.